Welcome back to another episode of Search It Up with Sienna, the web series where I use IMDb to discover and talk about all different types of movies and TV shows, and how the people in front of and behind the camera not only make it all possible, but are somehow all interconnected. I talk directly with the talent about their backstories and experiences on and off set, and what they're up to today. On my last episode, I talked about Barbie with production designer Sarah Greenwood. Jeremy Page worked on visual effects for Barbie, and he was a still photographer on Only Murders in the Building. So on this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite shows, Only Murders in the Building. And my first guest for this episode is writer and producer Madeleine George. Only Murders in the Building is about three neighbors in a New York City apartment building who discover their common obsession with murder mystery podcasts. And when a murder occurs in their building, they join together to start their own podcast. Steve Martin, who plays Charles, Martin Short, who plays Oliver, and Selena Gomez, who plays Mabel, star in the amazing series with an incredible cast and crew. Madeleine George lets us in on the process and the path that led her to the show. And now, without further ado, here's my interview with Madeleine George. Oh, so when did you start writing and what initially got you interested?
I mean, I wrote starting when I was really little. I was really into not just storytelling, but actually writing down my stories. Although I will say the joke that we just told each other about how easy it is to start and how hard it is to finish, that was really true. Like I spent my whole childhood writing like 100,000 beginnings, like just setup after setup after setup. And I also was like, I was obsessed with names and like relationships. And I used to like play Barbies, but I would play them in this like sort of endless, never ending story. Like, I never had a beginning, middle, and end to any of my stories as a kid. Mm-hmm. And then I started to write plays. Actually, when I was a teenager, I was in the Young Playwrights Festival, which is it doesn't exist anymore, but it was an organization in New York City that would bring teen playwrights to New York and give them full productions of plays. So I did that when I was 16, 17, and 18. And then I was like, oh, well, now I'm ruined forever for anything else. Like it was so fun to do that I was just like, well, that's what I want to do. And so yeah, I've been writing my whole life and always stories, sometimes fiction, sometimes plays, sometimes TV and movies, but never like poetry, for example, or anything like that.
I actually am my first, writing thing. I'm entering a playwriting competition. I just wrote a play for, so.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm so excited.
Well, speaking of playwriting, I know you just mentioned you've done a lot. Is there a play that you wrote or is your favorite or you've had like the most memorable experience writing?
I mean, I guess I would say the last play that I ever finished, which is called Hurricane Diane, that might be my favorite just because it was like, I for a long time, I was like, my plays have to be serious. They have to be important. I have to think about difficult topics and, ask really hard questions. And then there was like a whole part of me that was getting left to the side, which was the part that just likes to tell really stupid jokes. Mm-hmm. In Hurricane Diane, I was like, I'm going to mix these things up. So it's about climate change, but it's also like really silly and funny, almost like a Real Housewives parody.
How did you get into writing television after writing plays and just writing stories? Was it a challenging transition?
Yeah, I mean, it was lucky for me in the sense that other people that I knew who had been playwrights became TV writers. So I got to see them do it. And then I knew someone, a friend of mine who had been a playwright and then was transitioning and became a showrunner for TV. And she hired me on my first job. I'm not sure, for people who are just like out there kind of like, trying to make it in TV, it's so tough to get in. But if whatever, this was somebody who I knew who was able to be like, I could take a chance on her. Yeah. So I really was like learning on the job. I'm still learning on the job. It's like it's like writing TV is like being it's like being a carpenter or something.
Yeah.
You got to put those two boards together. You can't just like have whatever random board sticking out in whatever direction. And that learning how to do that, it's like different for plays. You can kind of do whatever you want in a play.
And did you always want to be a writer, or was there another like occupation you wanted to be when you were younger?
I mean, I really loved languages when I was young, and I still love foreign languages. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a linguist or a translator. But that stuff is cool, but you don't get to talk about people. You only get to like do this. You don't get to like think about people or characters or
Yeah.
anything. So I always wanted to be a writer and tell stories about people.
Did you have a specific category back then that you wanted to, like, did you want to write for movies, plays, TV?
I mean, theater was always the thing that I loved first. And maybe that's because, like, well, to be honest, like in my house, my parents were like, they didn't understand or care about TV. We had this like TV that only got 2 channels and it was black and white. So I didn't really watch TV when I was little. I didn't really know about it. I watched like Sesame Street, as a little kid.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I first got my first apartment by myself when I was 21 years old, I went out like bought a TV and brought it home. And then I just like watched TV like 24/7, for the first few weeks that I had that thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is great TV.
Yeah.
But like it came later for me.
How did you get involved with Only Murders in the Building?
Actually, your story about this web series starting in the pandemic, that it's kind of the same for me with Only Murders in the Building. Again, like I had a connection to the showrunner, and so I got a chance to have an interview, and submit with like a sample piece of writing. But also during the pandemic, I had made this stupid video and posted it online, like myself doing like a joke, like it's so stupid I can't even describe it, but it was like a kind of almost like a comedy act, which is not, I don't post videos online of myself doing funny bits because I'm just not a performer. But in the pandemic, like we were all doing things that we weren't used to doing.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And then they were like, wow, she's funny. So it was like, if I hadn't been trapped at home, I don't think I would have done that. And then maybe they wouldn't have, been like, oh, this person is funny enough that we can take a risk on her.
So what is the writing process like for Only Murders in the Building? Is there a writer's room? Does everyone come up with a storyline and the writers just go off and write it after?
It's very, 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 very collaborative. I'm just on lunch break now. And so like there's 11 or 12 people in a room, and people are, working on the story together at almost every junction. And then, certain writers are sent off on script, but only after all the decisions are made collectively about what story points are going to be in that. If you know Only Murders, you can imagine why that is. Cause it's like, there's like character stuff, but there's also mystery stuff. And there's also always like joke stuff. And so if we don't all just agree together, what's going to be in each episode, we'll get lost,
Definitely. I definitely understand that from watching the show. I watched it. This is my 3rd time rewatching it, actually.
You're a super fan. Amazing.
Yes, I love it. It's such a good, just well-written show too.
Thanks. People are smart and funny in that room. I'm looking in the direction of the room. They're really like a lot of smart people in that room.
Do you, when you write with the writers, do you do like episode at a time and then film, like episode film, like writing, or do you just write all of them and then film?
Yeah, all of them. I mean, although sometimes the writing process overlaps the shooting. So we're in the middle of working on the 4th season right now. And right now they're just starting to prepare to do the production. And so it's like, at that point, the showrunner, that's the boss of the show, the boss of the writers, but also the boss of the production. Like he starts to go back and forth from those 2 camps once production.
On the show, you're an executive story editor and a writer. So how do those roles differ?
They're not, honestly, those titles are like, they reflect like how long you've been in the business and how long you've been doing something. So it's not like, oh, if you're an executive story editor, you do this part of the writing. And if you're a producer, you do this part of the writing. It's more like, well, how many years have you been at this? Or how many different shows have you been on? Mm-hmm. So over time, I've moved up, like from one title to another. But, it's just the same. It's like, it's still writing the whole time. It's just like, how confident are you? How much can you supervise other writers? And I have lots of people who are above me in those ranks in the writer's room. And those people with like 10, 20 years experience, they really know how to tell a TV story. And someone like me I have 20 years of experience writing plays and 5 years of experience writing TV. So I might be like, it would be funny if he fell down. And then the more experienced writers are like, or what if he could? And then they have like even better ideas.
Oh, I see. Do you have a favorite character or a character you relate to most on the show?
Relate to most? That's so interesting. I mean, the obvious answer, I guess, would be like Oliver, who is the theater person, and that's the one played by Martin Short. But in a way, I mean, he's so great and he's so fun to write for because his voice, you know, just like lives in your
Yeah.
ear. He's just such a genius. But I also have a secret and very large soft spot in my heart for the character of Howard Morris, who's the cat guy in
Yeah.
season one. And that is partly, I will totally confess, because I know the actor. We were friends from the theater, and then he, you know, got that part, and then he really made such a meal out of that part, as they say, that they gave him more and more to do every season. His name is Michael Cyril Creighton.
When you were first on the show, or like when you first got presented the show, did they present like the idea to you? Like, had they started writing yet, or was this just like a fresh idea?
They had started writing, so they had a pilot, and that was how they were interviewing people, and they were like, read this pilot. Is it interesting to you? What's your response? What do you have to say back to it? And so they had the kind of anchor or the foundation of the show. But then once we got into the writers' room together, it was like, okay, well, you know, we started to build that mystery out as a group.
And is there a favorite episode that you've written?
I mean, I worked on an episode in the second season that has a blackout in it. And that was a really fun episode for me to write, because it was like, you know, to be honest, like building mysteries, that's not my normal like wheelhouse, but like little scenes where characters get to interact in sort of intense and surprising ways, that's really fun for me. And so writing those little, like the little scenes, for example, between Howard and then the guy, Jonathan, who becomes his boyfriend, like those are really fun for me to write.
Do you know what's going to happen in an episode before you write the script? Like, do you almost have like an outline before?
Absolutely. So much of an outline. Like it's not only like we know what should happen by the end, but that like each scene we decide as a group, like what's going to happen in that scene, what's going to be the take on the scene, how we're going to get into it, what are people going to do in it.
Now, this is a bit of an odd question I just thought of the top of my head, but do you prefer writing like on paper and pen or on your computer?
This is what I prefer writing in. I have a really obsessive connection to my notebook. For TV, it's like you gotta get used to using your hands like this, because those scripts are like, that's how people communicate in film and TV. So like I do a little both.
Do you ever work directly with the actors when writing? Is there ever a time where you consult with them or they come in?
Yeah, the stars of the show are themselves comedy geniuses, right? So they often have ideas about what their characters might be, what will be fun for them to do, and sometimes they give those ideas to the showrunner. Sometimes they come in like via Zoom, for example, and they speak to the whole writers' room. It would be wrong to write for people that's that funny and not to like let them guide what's good in the story.
I feel like the music plays a big part in the show when like the very suspenseful music comes in, and even like the introduction music, it's just such a distinct sound. When you're writing a scene or when you're writing an episode, do you ever think about that music in the writer's room and how you can incorporate it in?
That's such a great question. I mean, I don't think that we don't think about it that much, or we don't talk about it that much, and it comes in the production process, so in the editing process. But we should think about it. You know, I think a lot of times, like we'll think about, well, how is a scene built suspensefully, and we're trying to sort of cue in the script, like for the editors later on, for the director, for the showrunner, like how could music support that? You know.
Yeah. And this is a comedy series, but is it ever get challenging to try to find a way to incorporate the drama and the comedy in it? Because it's not just all jokes. I mean, there's definitely some serious topics in it and some serious things that happen.
Yeah, I think it is hard. I think we work hardest on trying to figure out like, well, how much balance, you know, what's the balance? So how much mystery do we need to do and get accomplished, and how much funny can we have? What takes up the most space? And it's different episodes have different amounts of serious to funny.
Do you have a favorite episode that has been written like by anyone? Is there just a favorite episode overall that you've loved?
I mean, in a way, I love the episode 10 of season 1 the most. It's the one where the like all comes together at the end, and there's like the standoff in the basement, and it's just so, to me, and then there's so much funny stuff. Like
there is.
Oh my gosh, remember Steve Martin in that dog stroller?
Yeah, and then when he thinks he imagines what he's saying, but it's that was funny.
Yeah, it's so funny. And the writers who wrote that script wrote it like superheroes, like pretty quickly, and like they managed to pull like all those disparate threads together. And to me, it's just like what they call a tour de force, you know.
And how long does it usually take you guys to come up with an idea or write one episode?
I mean, some episodes are tough, and then they're like, you have to break, as they say, you know, break an episode. In other words, to decide what goes in it, you have to break it and break it and break it over and over again. And then some are like breezes and they go really fast. But, you know, like, for example, we're on like week 12 or something of this season, and we are writing the 5th script right now out of 10. So that gives you maybe a sense, and we're going to do, 24 weeks or something all together. So we're almost halfway through our writing, and we're almost halfway through our scripts as well.
And do you ever, if you're stuck on maybe like a point in the script, do you ever just flip to the next episode, or do you just kind of have to stick with it?
You have to stick with it. But the thing that's so great is it's not just you alone. Like if you're by yourself and you're trying to create your series, like you got so much pressure on yourself.
Exactly.
For me, I'm just like, I'm not smart enough to make this joke. And I'm just like, knock, knock, knock. Hello, 11 other smart people. Like, will you fix this joke?
Is there a favorite writer's room snack you like to snack on while you're writing?
People are obsessed in our writer's room with a particular kind of gum called cubes. These ice cubes. Have you ever seen these? They come
I
in like
think I have. Yeah.
they're by the checkout at the supermarket. They're incredibly flavorful. So they're like kind of like fill your face with the flavor of some fake fruit. And they are like they keep you from eating like pretzels and peanut butter, and which is good because otherwise you would just do that all day long. But one of the writer's assistants went to the dentist because she went to the doctor because she thought she had an ear infection, and the doctor said to her, "Have you been chewing a lot of gum lately?" She literally like injured her inner ear chewing this gum.
Oh my gosh.
So who knew that gum was so dangerous? But now you do know.
And is there any details at all you can tell us about season 4 or any?
No, I'll get in so much trouble. I can't tell you anything. I can't say anything at all except Steve Martin and Martin Short are in it.
Finally, I'm doing a search it up. I've done this with a bunch of writers that I've interviewed, and I'm building a story with some of my guests. So you're the 4th guest to participate. So
cool.
It's basically the story so far, and then you add on a little, like another little piece to the story, and then it'll keep adding until you have a full story. Okay, so once upon a time, there was a young girl who was very quiet in her own way, and that little girl had a mother who was her biggest support, and she encouraged her to go into the world and do amazing things. But then, one day, the girl returned home to find that her mother had disappeared. Now she was alone in the world. Then she finds a clue about where her mother might be, and she goes on a journey to see if she can find her mother. She gets a phone call in the middle of the night, and it's her mother saying, "Please don't try to find me. I left because I had to leave, and I'm sorry."
Ooh, whoa, that is intense. Okay. But the little girl didn't listen to her mother. She went into the garage, got her mother's electric scooter, fired it up, and drove off into the night.
Perfect. I mean, it takes a story somewhere.
Totally. Somewhere. The next person will say.
Well, this was an amazing interview. I'm so happy I got to speak with you. I had so much fun talking to you, and I learned so much about the show and writing in general. So thank you for this.
Great to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Madeleine, for your inside look on the writing process on Only Murders in the Building and beyond. Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode of Only Murders in the Building with actor Adina Verson, who plays Poppy on the show. See you then!